The 1011 Now streaming studio in Lincoln, Nebraska. This is the REPORT Husker Show.
Hello and welcome, everyone. I am Bill Rentschler in the 1011 Now streaming studio, joined as always by Sports Director Kevin Sjuts and Sports Reporter Chase Matteson. It is Tuesday afternoon following a bye week for the Husker football team. They're getting ready to host Northwestern on Saturday. Matt Rhule spoke yesterday. We had coordinators today. Hey, everyone had a lot to say between Rhule yesterday talking for over a half an hour and coordinators today.
And you get more players to talk at these news conferences following Nebraska wins.
Yes.
And the Huskers beat Illinois last time on the field 20-7. And there were some nice storylines and some player emergences that happened in that game. And so that was part of the reason for the influx of interviewees at the Hawks Championship Center on Tuesday.
Well, the big thing I think that probably came out from, at least one of the big things that came out from yesterday with Matt Rhule is that he basically, we finally said it, Heinrich Haarberg is your QB1 moving forward. Jeff Sims is ready at a moment's notice. He's fully healthy, but Heinrich has played well enough that he's going to get the nod basically from here on out.
Well, this offense has obviously modified what its approach is. And maybe at the start of the year, you would think that this is a team that would take some shots downfield. They would be more explosive play laden. But given the injury situations with, you're down to third string running back or option number 3 at running back, and you lose a pair of potential starters at wide receiver in Marcus Washington and Isaiah Garcia Castaneda. So that group is very youthful, to say the least. And so you have to play to what you have. And Nebraska's offense is, be honest, it's pretty simple. And part of the simplicity of it is don't turn the football over. And if you're evaluating your quarterback spot, knowing that that is the approach, Heinrich Haarberg is going to be the guy.
Yeah, and Chase, today we heard from offensive coordinator Marcus Satterfield. He even said, I understand it's painful to watch sometimes. It's not very pretty, but like Kevin just said, this is a don't turn the ball over, don't shoot yourself in the foot type of offense right now.
Yeah, I don't want to go as far as saying it's elementary because Marcus Satterfield is a good offensive coordinator, but it's definitely not what he was doing at South Carolina, and the schemes and what the type of football they want to play is different. And I think Haarberg kind of fits that mold for right now. Each quarterback brings different things to the table, but Haarberg's been the best as a leader in protecting the football. So it's good to kind of be able to establish a QB1 and kind of clear the mist and smoke that we've had the past few weeks of, Sims is getting healthy. Sims looks really good. Sims now transitioning into a backup role is something that, from all the coaches and players have talked about, has taken on very well. He's a single digit for a reason. But yeah, I think, this is a Nebraska football team that's going to win by playing sound football all around. It's not going to be a shootout and they're going to outscore you just by a ton.
And someone asked him today, Kevin, hey, are you preparing different, Heinrich, now that you know that you're going to be the starter? And I think a lot of fans would like his response. And he was basically like, no. I'm still preparing like I'm fighting for this job and I'm fighting for my opportunity.
That's what got him the job in the first place. And I think this is our moment to pause and give credit where credit is due, and that is to Jeff Sims. As he has rehabbed and he's continued to stay in the film room and in the playbook and learn Nebraska's game plan for each of these upcoming contests. He hasn't packed it in. He hasn't complained. From everything we know, he's been a great teammate. He's been supportive of Heinrich Haarberg. He's helped give the offense a second look at the quarterback spot. And that's got to be tough. He came here and, he hit the NIL deals right away with Amigos and Akers. And, he was he was one of the guys that went to Indianapolis for Big Ten football media days. He earned one of those single digits. One of the undisputed leaders of the team going into the season, and now we're at the midway point of the year, and he's not even the starting quarterback. So, that's a tough look in the mirror for Jeff Sims, but it sounds like he has handled it very respectfully and very maturely. And, we have some clips of video, Chase and I, from the Nebraska football games and practices we've attended where you can tell that those two quarterbacks, Heinrich Harburg and Jeff Sims, they get along pretty well. There's even one shot that I believe it was before the Louisiana Tech game where Heinrich and Jeff are like shadow boxing each other. And it was playful. It was great.
Yeah.
In that game, we really did not know who was going to start at quarterback leading right up to kickoff. And despite that competitive nature of one of the most competitive positions on the field, there seemed to just be a friendliness about it. And I know Chase got a couple shots from the Illinois game where Jeff Sims is one of the first guys over congratulating Heinrich on the bench right after the Huskers make a big play.
And you've seen it, too, even in some of the video that the Huskers themselves have put out on their platforms, some inside the locker room stuff where Jeff Sims is, breaking down the huddle and, he's still leading the team, as you said, because that's a situation that, it could certainly go sour. Then that could maybe sour part of the locker room, but this is the other end of that
it could
spectrum.
be toxic.
Oh, yeah.
It could very well be toxic, especially considering everything that was rolled into Jeff Sims' arrival at Nebraska because he essentially won the job over Casey Thompson. Mm-hmm. So the quarterback room has really evolved in an unexpected way over the past 10 months. And here we are. The guy who is leading Nebraska's offense on the field is a Kearney Catholic grad who played Class C football, was a 3-star recruit out of high school, and had very limited college experience heading into this year.
Yeah.
But as we've learned, as Heinrich's story has become public, and we've learned about how the teammates all rally around him, and it seems like he's roomed with about everybody on the roster.
Yes.
He is one of the more well-liked guys inside the Nebraska locker room.
Yeah.
And I think there's also some attachment and affinity for the program, given the fact that Heinrich's dad played for Nebraska, and he came to games when he was a kid. He's an in-state player. I hate to use the phrase, it just means more, but for Heinrich Harburg and a lot of the guys that are from this state,
it does just mean a little more.
It does mean a little bit more.
That's actually the SEC slogan.
Right, that's why we hesitate for a second here because
no Chase was going to pounce on that. SEC action.
It does just mean more. But, the interesting thing, I think, about this quarterback shift and not being toxic in the locker room, I've looked at the depth charts, and we get a new depth chart every week and stuff. If you look at that Minnesota week depth chart, it looks a whole lot different than the depth chart does now. And I think and the quarterback room itself, it's its own entity, but I think part of the team rallying behind Heinrich and that transition being a lot easier has been how many holes the rest of the roster have had to plug, right? And you have guys like a Ty Hahn and now Malachi Coleman that were probably getting more reps with Heinrich in some of those camps or in some of those teams to kind of say, here's some perspective. Obviously, you have Billy Kemp still, and Alex Bullock has shined and grown, but I think the offense and even on the defense, players having to step up has made this quarterback transition, I think, less drastic, in my opinion.
That's a fascinating point, Chase, because these are Heinrich's guys. If you were to go back to fall camp, the dudes who are running with the first-string offense
were probably a lot of the second-string offense.
And we're repping with Heinrich.
Yeah.
So that is a really fascinating point. The one unit that is on the offense that really can't say the same is the offensive line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's been some recent praise for the guys up front. Matt Rhule has always had their backs, and he even went so far on Monday to say that's a unit that's been scarred by the criticism because following last year and the struggles the Huskers had in 2022, so much of it fell on that offensive line. And most of that group returned. Turner Corcoran, Bryce Benhart. They bring in Ben Scott. Nuri becomes eligible to play this year. Ethan Piper was a part of that group. So those are guys that, they have heard the noise from outside. And they have underperformed at times and would even know about it. Mm-hmm. Their testimony is pretty fascinating, and yet here they are with this Nebraska offense, just don't turn the ball over approach. Well, there's a lot of onus that goes on the ball carriers, but there's even more so of a responsibility for the guys up front to try to keep the Huskers on schedule. Don't get behind the chains, and a lot of that goes to the O-line. and I don't know that they've received their due. And maybe that's part of Matt Rhule's emphasis to highlight the offensive line in his news conference following Nebraska's bye week, is because he knows that those guys have not gotten much love, though they have performed at I don't know, what's their mid-season grade?
I would probably give him a passing, a C+,
B minus. Chase, what do you say?
I mean, if you are rushing for 200 yards a game, almost one of the top rushing teams in the country, that's a pretty good grade.
Yeah, I think also, you look at pass protection, it's been solid. I'm not one to look into all the PFF grades and stuff like that, and Matt Rhule isn't either, as we heard yesterday. But I think, this is a pretty solid offensive line. There has been some unforced errors that have hurt the offensive line from a sack standpoint, and that's kind of due to some of the fumbles and some of the issues earlier in the season. But this has been a pretty solid offensive line from a run scheme standpoint, and even against Illinois, they were able to really kind of push force. And even Rhule mentioned Ethan Piper, playing with a broken hand and having a glove on or a cast on while he plays. He was going up against some NFL talent in Illinois, and I think they kind of won the battle in the trenches. So last year, where they did take a lot of slack, I think you can kind of, sing their praises. And this is kind of a team that's maybe a squad or a position group that's a little bit, naturally kind of the unsung heroes. And so I think Rhule wanted to point that out.
Chase, what's your grade on the O-line, though?
Let's say B.
Yeah, I think that's about right. Nobody's going to give him an A, but as you pointed out, Bill, Nebraska is rushing for 200.5 yards per game, second in the Big Ten in rushing. Now, granted, some of that is, quarterbacks making plays in the open field. They've hit some big ones, whether it's Jeff Sims or Heinrich Harburg, but so have all the other teams. Yeah. So it's not like you're going.
If the sack yardage is going to count against you in the rushing totals, then those QB runs have to count for you.
17th nationally in the country.
Yeah.
And, it's fascinating that we're spending a lot of time talking about Nebraska's offense when, prior to the Illinois game, the message was, we're a defensive football team.
Yeah.
So Matt Rhule made it publicly known that the Huskers will win with their defense. Mm-hmm. And then the Huskers go to Illinois, and they hold the Fighting Illini to 7 points, despite them being on the doorstep on their opening drive. And we've seen the defense of a defensive football team get even better and play with even more swagger. Isaac Gifford said on Tuesday that this team goes to practice like they just got their butts whooped.
Yep.
So that's not a physical thing. That's a mental thing. And so this coaching staff deserves some credit on how they've been able to shift this team mentally, especially on defense. And I think that's what's making them so good, is that they are not only growing in their confidence, they're playing with this chip on your shoulder. We're going to hit you in the mouth, and we're never going to stop fighting.
And that kind of segues into, I think, one of the other things I wanted to talk about that Rhule put heavy emphasis on yesterday, because, we've done it. A lot of the media have done it. You look at the back half of the schedule, and it looks like, hey, it should be fairly easy. But Rhule really wanted to hammer home that, this team is in the process of rebuilding, and we can't look ahead to, weeks out. We need to look ahead to every week, every opponent, because this team's still learning how to win.
Matt had a pretty big message to share on Monday, didn't he?
Yeah.
And that was maybe unexpected. You thought the talk was going to be about the bye week, or maybe about Nebraska Northwestern and the series history, or maybe about how the team, has maybe a little bit of a self-evaluation over the first 6 weeks of the season. But instead his message was, I don't care about the next month and a half. I care about one game. I care about one practice. And then he took it not another step further, another 20 yards further, by saying that has been what has plagued Nebraska in recent years. The big picture talk, the bowl conversation, and the where do they stand in the Big Ten West, all these 1,000-foot views of the program, it does you no good And Matt Rhule even said it would serve him no purpose to try to start talking about the Huskers' bowl projections, which, oh, by the way, they are popping up on multiple bowl projections, and it looks like December 26th might be a busy date for Husker fans. But Coach Rhule's not going there because he knows that's going to get away from his overall message to his coaching staff and to his players of one rep, one day, one game at a time. And it was a little bit like John Cook. You know, Nebraska volleyball has a monstrous matchup on Saturday. It's number 1 versus number 2 at the Devaney Center, and tickets are going for like $500. John Cook had none of it when talking about this week because they play on Wednesday first.
Yeah.
And that aligns with Matt Rhule and how he is saying, I will give you guys nothing about the distant future. I will give you stuff about the immediate future. And for Coach Rhule, the immediate future is not just about Saturday. It's about Tuesday practice, and then Wednesday practice, and then Thursday practice. It's so microscopic in terms of the way that they are approaching each and every moment as they continue to build the program.
It's one rep at a time. And Chase, it almost felt like he was trying to maybe, again, he said, you know, it's okay for the fans to kind of do some of that stuff, but it almost kind of sounded like he was trying to, you know, educate the fans a little bit of like, hey, this is maybe the mindset you guys need to have too, and that like it's one rep at a time, it's one game at a time.
In terms of Rhule or Cook, because they both were.
In terms of Rhule, Cook, I think again everyone knows what's going on with the volleyball program, but the football program's in a much different place.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the whole like snow globe analogy, right? Like the Husker fans wanted to see the whole snow globe. Well, Matt Rhule's inside the snow globe. He's at the little village or whatever it is, focused on what's immediately in front of you. And I think, that kind of comes along the terms of a bowl game. Because sure, you chalk it up, on paper, we sitting here talking about it. We could spend an hour breaking down how Nebraska is going to win 4 of the next 6 and make a bowl or go 7-5 but I think this is a program that he already knew kind of coming into it that this wasn't a team that was going to be able just to overnight win 9 or 10 games like he did at Baylor and Temple, right? It takes time. And so I think it just gives good perspective to fans. He's not like telling fans to, I think it's more like he wants fans to kind of join him rather than shift their foot. Like he's not telling them they have to, but he's kind of saying like, this is how I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to go about things. If you want to come along with me, this is how I'm viewing things.
He called the fans out.
A little bit.
And he loves the fans. He loves Husker Nation.
Yes.
He tells a story about meeting the 97-year-old lady in Takema.
Yep.
We've heard that story a few times. And he's really endeared himself to the fans. In fact, I know a few people that went back and listened to Matt Rhule's Monday news conference multiple times just to try to pick up what he was putting down. And, like we said, he had a message. And it's a message that hasn't been spoken by a Nebraska football coach since when? Ever?
I don't think, Ever.
Because Tom Osborne had good teams, even going all the way back to when he became Nebraska's head coach in the 70s. And so it's different. And he's trying to tell everybody. Like, I think that some of the fans' tendency to look at where does the program stack up with conference opponents nationally and what are the postseason possibilities. That stems from a program that was dominant in the 90s and had continued success in the early 2000s. And then mid-2000s, it started to wane. And with Bo Pelini, there was still a consistency of reaching a bowl game. Were they the bowl games Husker fans wanted them to go to? No, but it was all in a line of like, we can look at, is it December 31st or is it January 1 or is it January 8? And then when you take that all away, like you are at ground zero. But yet there's a clinging to, what does it look like at the end of the season? What does it look like in December? What does it look like in January? And he wants none of that. And he thinks that's part of the problem because there's been a fascination with, the end game. There becomes less of a focus on the here and now.
And I think, fans, especially are guilty of this. I don't want to say the players are, but to see a team like Northwestern on your schedule and just immediately think, all right, we're going to win that game. Shouldn't be a problem. And then that's, when you show up in Ireland and get punched in the mouth and you lose that game.
Well, thanks for bringing that up, right? That's ripping open a scab.
Yes.
But the other thing, too, about looking at the big picture for Nebraska fans and maybe the disconnect between the program and the fandom is, you can look down the road when you can just roll out the ball and beat a Northwestern, and you can just show up and you can beat Purdue. They just haven't been there.
Mm-mm.
We don't need to document all the things that have led to the decrease in talent on the team. And I'm not saying this team is not talented, but it doesn't have the ability to just show up and beat an opponent. And that's not just a 2023 thing. Mm-hmm. You could roll the clock back to the Mike Riley era and perhaps even before then, where it just was not the case. Not to mention, when you look at what are the chances in the Big Ten West and what are the chances for this bowl game on December 29th, you are creating pressure. And this is a program that, for whatever reason, the coaches and the players have not always handled pressure the best. And that there have been seasons in which games are going down to the fourth quarter and there is just insurmountable pressure on that game, and they come up on the wrong side of the outcome. So maybe by staying hyper-focused, you're removing the pressure, and it's less about what does that one play do for the course of the season, and what does it do for where they're going to finish up in the Big Ten standings. And it's more about, all right, can we just execute on 3rd and 7?
Yeah, you don't have to worry about winning the Big Ten West. You have to worry about beating Northwestern.
But that could come. But it's not going to come until, the concrete is poured in the basement and the flooring is down, the walls are up, and there's drywall on.
Yeah. We could talk about this for a really long time.
Hey, Matt Rhule went big picture without going big picture.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was my big takeaway from Monday.
Yeah.
Like, he said he doesn't like talking about the big picture, but the message in which he conveyed to the fans was all big picture related.
It was. Coming off a bye week, I guess.
Maybe he was a psychology major. I don't know. But it got a lot of people thinking, just the way that he handled Monday's news conference. And there wasn't much chatter about Northwestern and getting back on the field.
There wasn't. One thing we did hear, though, Chase, is that Luke Reimer will be back, which will be a nice lift for this defense. He's missed the last 2 games. A MRSA infection, I think, is what I heard.
Yeah.
So, which is never pleasant.
Yeah. Even talking today about the black shirts, they were saying that there was a question asked to Tony White, like, is there 11 black shirts? How does that kind of work? And then it's like, well, technically right now there's 12 because they never took Luke Reimers away. And he was back, and, the Tony White kind of said, like, at first he was a little bit hesitant to make the calls and to be out there normally, but now he's full go. And so I think he just needed a minute to kind of get back into the groove of things, but he's a fierce leader and a black shirt in his own right. So it'll be big to have him back on a defense that has just been riddled with injuries, it felt like, the whole season.
Yeah, Kevin, you said it best. It's a mash unit, especially on offense. Malachi Coleman will be getting his first start on Saturday. And, Jalen Lloyd playing a lot, freshman, again from Omaha. So it'll be interesting to watch that. So 2:30.
But they have 2 really good tight ends.
They do have.
So as fixated as some people can be on the young talent that's going to be on the field against Northwestern at the wide receiver spot, you have Thomas Fedoni, you have Nate Borkircher, both really good options. And you also have Billy Kemp the fourth.
Yeah, and Billy Kemp, is the most seasoned guy beyond anybody. And, I know, just to touch on those receivers really quick, Malachi Coleman, right now he might make a big play for you, but the way that this offense is designed, he's not going to get a ton of separation from the secondary. It would have to be kind of a zone scheme where he finds an opening. And right now they've used those Lloyds and Marcus Washington they were using in that sense, kind of at those deep ball 50-50 kind of big play potential. The bread and butter where they're going to actually have success in the passing game is going to be, a drag to Billy Kemp, a 10-yard dig from Thomas Fedoni or Nate. So, don't have too many expectations for them. It would be nice to see Malachi to get some catches because once you get a catch, right, he's already had his first career catch or just had his first career catch. Once you get one, you kind of get into the groove of things, but I wouldn't have too much expectations on the passing game.
Alex Bullock, Ty Hahn, also options at the wide receiver spot. It's going to be interesting to see, how this passing game evolves, knowing that, there's 6 games of study out on Nebraska's offense, and you're going to face some really good defensive coordinators coming up. In fact, look at the upcoming 2 current head coaches, Braun at Northwestern and then Ryan Walters of Purdue. They're both former defensive coordinators, and that's kind of the bread and butter of both of those teams right now. So they're going to try to take away Heinrich and his running ability. And, what was it, the Michigan game? Heinrich, I don't know that he had positive rushing yards.
I think he had -2.
So, I don't want to say Nebraska's offense is going to be easy to scheme for, but there is a clear thing that if you are facing Nebraska, you want to do defensively, and you have 2 really good coaches that are going to be scheming that. So somebody's got to step up and make a play in the pass game, and maybe the second half of the season is going to be the story of Malachi Coleman's emergence, or Alex Bullock becomes Mr. Reliable for this offense. And that's what makes a lot of intrigue and fascination with the remaining 6 games on Nebraska's schedule. Not to mention, the Huskers are going to be playing for something here down the stretch.
Yeah. Again, 3-3 coming into this week. Northwestern also 3-3, but this is the first time this season, I believe, that Nebraska is favored against a Power 5 opponent
by double digits.
I believe the line opened at 12.5.
It's at 11.
Looking at it right now, and it's at 11 with an over/under at 41, which is at least higher than Iowa and Minnesota.
I think 11's a little bit strangely high in my opinion.
It does feel a little bit high.
This is a competitive Northwestern team. Like they took Minnesota to overtime and won that game.
Mm-hmm.
Like they've played competitive. They played right in the beginning against Duke. I don't know. The weird thing is they're coming off of a win against Howard where they won by 3 points against the Howard team that's not.
Well, there's some questions. Their starting quarterback was injured, and I think there's some questions as to whether or not he'll be available to play. And
they had junior Brendan. They had Brendan Sullivan against Howard, and he threw 2 touchdowns, but it's limited sample size. He has 192 passing yards in the season. So, yeah, I'm not exactly sure what we're going to see. And even Tony White talked about that they've played really 3 quarterbacks in totality. So,
beyond this year's Northwestern team, as we look at this being an 11-point spread, it's Nebraska Northwestern. This series has been weirdly competitive, always down to the wire. A walk-off field goal by Northwestern in Evanston. I don't remember the year. Jordan Westerkamp's Hail Mary catch. There have been so many games that have gone down to the final possession. In fact, 7 of the last 12 meetings between these schools have been decided by 3 points or fewer. So for the line to be at 11, I mean, maybe the odds makers aren't quite privy on the way these 2 programs have played against each other in recent memory.
I mean, outside of 2021.
Well, what happened last year? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
No, that's another example.
They were favored by double digits, I believe, last year, and then yeah.
Last year was a really close competitive game that went down to the end.
Outside of 2021, you're right. I think it's been single-digit points, for either side. So yeah, well, it seems high to me. We'll see. But yeah, so they are favored. So hopefully they can get it done. Back at home, 2:30. Kevin, who do we got on the call this weekend?
Well, it's a BTN broadcast at 2:30. Corey Provis on the play-by-play. Jake Butt, former Michigan standout, is going to be doing the color commentary with Brooke Fletcher on the sidelines doing the reporting for Big Ten Network. It's going to go Nebraska football on BTN straight to Nebraska volleyball on BTN So if you have plans to be in front of the TV on Saturday, you can really help out the viewership numbers for Big Ten Network as they're going to broadcast both of those games back to back.
And that segues me right into volleyball. Again, 2-0 last week, beating Michigan State at home, and then sweeping number 13 Penn State at home. That second set, Kevin, they get down. 9-1, and they still come back and they win. This team is just fun to watch.
They've got a lot of grit. They got a lot of scrap in them. It starts with Lexi Rodriguez.
Defensive Player of the Week.
Laney Choboy's having a good year. I brought up the point to John Cook here today that, Bergen Riley is doing a great job setting, but her defense really is not getting the shine that it deserves, averaging about 2.5 digs per set. He complimented her blocking ability as well. So this team wins with they're a defensive volleyball team. But Nebraska volleyball, that Penn State match was pretty impressive. Leaving the Devaney Center on Saturday night, that was maybe the most impressed I've been with the team.
John Cook said today he doesn't think his team's put together a solid match yet this year.
Solid road match.
Solid road.
So that's a disclaimer. But they won at Stanford, so I would think that's a pretty solid match.
Yes.
I don't know. Chase, your opinion on this, was that the best Nebraska volleyball has looked this year? I'd say Creighton was pretty good. I also thought they played really well against Kentucky. Yeah, I thought Penn State that was pretty solid.
Kentucky stood out to me, but I think Penn State is probably the most complete this team has looked all year. Just like the way that Krause kind of has bounced back and really came on for them, and then like. The less that they have to rely or lean on Merritt Beeson and Harper Murray to be able to have other players making plays, the team was very sound on Saturday night.
So they'll be at Northwestern. That is on BTN Plus. That is 7 p.m. on Wednesday. That is all John Cook wanted to talk about today. It's Northwestern.
We tried. I don't know if you noticed the media, and it wasn't just the volleyball beat reporters. There were a few others that trying to get a little something to grab onto about Wisconsin, whether it's about the fan interest or the spotlight of the sport or the ticket sale numbers. He shut out all of it.
Nope.
He was pretty hyper-focused just on Northwestern. And John Cook was quick to mention that Nebraska's last trip to Evanston, it was a 5-setter.
Yep.
And, if Nebraska were to stumble in Evanston on Wednesday, not that it would take away from the elite level that Nebraska-Wisconsin will be on Saturday, but it would put a little asterisk on it. Because right now it's number 1 versus number 2 in a pair of undefeated opponents, and Nebraska fans know that Wisconsin has had the Huskers number dating back multiple years. And this one could not only decide a Big Ten champion, it could also play a factor later in the year when regional hosts are decided.
Mm-hmm. And I will throw a shout-out to Caleb Henry, our radio partner. He looked up Nebraska playing in number 1 versus number 2 matchups, and they're 2-3 in those 5 matches. The most recent one coming, looks like it was back in 2019 when Stanford came to town and Nebraska lost that match. Looks like 3-1. So, 7 p.m. tickets or what? You were talking about this earlier. $500 right now for tickets?
That's not the going rate.
The cheapest standing room only, $284.
That's to stand and watch.
I would pay that.
An actual seat about $337.
Yeah.
So,
like that's
per ticket.
That's going rate for this volleyball match. I've seen a few around the $500 range. I'm just curious. There are a lot of fans who support the football program and the volleyball program that are season ticket holders of both. How are the fans going to manage this? It is conceivable to go straight from football to volleyball. Football kicks off at about 2:30. Let's just say it's a 3.5 hour match. It takes you up to 6 o'clock, and then you can roll right over to the Devaney Center. I think you could do the double.
That's ideal.
Well,
I think ideal is like, football's maybe up 20, up big in the first
you're
quarter.
a leave the stadium early guy?
Hey, if I got to get over to the Bob to get my seats and get my popcorn, get in my chair.
Okay, that could be one exception.
Yeah.
What one of the reporters at the press conference was talking about covering both events on Saturday, and she was actually saying that she's going to try to get on one of those like Bird or Lime scooters.
Oh, the scooters.
And just scooter between the stadium, because trying to move your car from a football game to Devaney is going to be a nightmare in itself.
Does the scooter have enough power to get up the big hill?
I would be more worried if the scooter has enough power to carry the behemoth sports camera you guys carry around.
Oh, well, we didn't say we were going to do it from a media perspective.
This was a print journalist. So
it's just a notepad and a pen. That's all that.
And a backpack, perhaps.
backpack,
but I
yeah.
just, those scooters, I just don't like. You have to go up the hill and down the hill. You
They
can really
end
get
up-
cooked.
they're pretty powerful. They're pretty powerful.
They end up over here on the corner, like by the station. We're at 40th and Vine here at 1011. 99% of those scooters are in the downtown area on campus, but then there's just every now and then there's one over here.
Are you
I'm like,
underestimating the curb appeal of the 1011 building?
No, I'm not. I'm just wondering what you were doing that you decided to take a scooter from UNL campus. all
Maybe
the way
we have a
down Vine.
geotag that people need to hit this point of reference in some scavenger hunt.
That's entirely possible.
Do you remember the Pokemon Go?
Oh yeah, no. My family is still. My youngest is into Pokemon Go. There's a Pokestop here at 1011.
So there we go.
So-
Maybe it's people doing the Pokestop.
Could be. That's entirely possible. All right, we've really gone off the rails here if we're talking about Pokemon Go. One last thing I want to ask you about, Kevin. I wasn't as in tune to it yesterday, but I noticed it on Twitter and social media. State softball. Looks like it was a really, really good turnout. Was it moved from Hastings up to Omaha, and then they put it on TV as well?
Okay, so what happened was the NSAA changed the format and the location and television plans for state softball. The NSAA made a very risky decision. Obviously, it went before the board and it got approved. Typically, high school state softball ends on a Friday in Hastings. That's where the entire tournament is played. Mm-hmm. And the championship it's a double elimination format. So if the team that goes undefeated through the bracket, if they lose in the final, it's double elimination. So they would have a second, if necessary, game to determine the champion. Because of the facility that the state tournament is played in, which is the Bill Smith Softball Complex in Hastings, and also the uncertain nature of the true championship game, if it's the first game or the second, it had always restricted television coverage because, what does that day look like? Are you going to broadcast one championship, two championships? It could be a long day. It could be a short day. Not to mention, there would be multiple finals happening at the same time. Bill Smith has several fields, and they have a championship field for Class A, championship field for Class B, championship field for Class C. So that's what state softball looked like previously. The changes that were made was, first off, they said there is no if necessary game. It is a winner-take-all final. So there's only going to be one championship game per class. They were not going to play A, B, and C all simultaneously. By doing that, they can move now to one location and one field that can play the state finals back to back to back. They decided to take it out of Hastings for the championship. And that was maybe a source of a little bit of contention for the folks that are traditionalists and they like having the championships in Hastings because that's where the tournament is.
Yeah.
And they put it at the brand new facility on the campus of UNO. And it's a beautiful facility. And they said, we're going to have this one site, which is not where the rest of the tournament is, but it's going to allow us to go 1, 2, 3. All state finals, all a winner take all. And on top of all of this, and this is the cherry on top, is Nebraska Public Media now has the ability to televise the final because each of those games, a trophy will be presented, and there are no two games going on simultaneously.
Yeah.
And from a fan's perspective, you've made a one ticket to watch all of the championships, and you're not fighting for your time. So the pictures that you probably saw in the video of the state championships, yes, they were impressive. amazing crowds, electric atmosphere. They were able to do ceremonial first pitches, and they're able to have the teams walk in and do the proper introduction. Again, that's because of the facility that they are at. Mm-hmm. So you talk about hitting a home run, pun intended. The NSAA did it with all of those variables. This wasn't as simple as, should we televise the finals or not? No, it was much more complicated. And the crowd, it was great. But if you think about what the previous crowd looked like, well, you had people dispersed at 3 different fields trying to watch 3 different finals. So now you get everybody, all eyes, one field, and that's part of the reason. Not to mention you're able to attract more of the casual softball viewer and fan by putting it in Omaha. Mm-hmm. Pretty cool stuff. And there has been so much conversation recently about women's sports being on fire. And John Cook talked about it. You know, it's not just a volleyball thing, which Volleyball Day in Nebraska certainly lit the fire. Mm-hmm. Now you have Iowa women's basketball playing at Kinnick Stadium. And then if we go hyper-local here in the state of Nebraska, now we're seeing it at the high school level with state softball in the crowd that it just generated on Monday night.
Yeah, you had Jordy Ball there with Nebraska throwing out one of those ceremonial first pitches. It was just, all of a sudden, it was just all over my Twitter timeline. And I was like, man, what the heck is going on?
I think maybe some people underestimated the impact of the NSAA making those decisions. And I don't know that there are too many arguments saying that the Nebraska School Activities Association did not do the right thing. If anything, it might have been, why wasn't it done sooner? Yeah. Well, this softball field at UNO is fairly new, and it is a wonderful facility. It is adjacent to Tal Anderson Field, which just hosted the high school state baseball championships in the spring. And if you recall, back in May, those crowds were electric, and everybody was just it's the perfect size, and it's the perfect facility to host the state high school championship.
Good deal. All right. I think that's a good thing to end on, unless either one of you have anything else that you are burdened with that you need to get off your chest. I should ask, how was your guys' bye week? I should have started the show with that.
Not too bad. Busy, but good.
Good.
I enjoyed my bye.
That's good.
It was nice.
It was nice. And now we're back into the swing of things. All right. Well, for Sports Director Kevin Sjuts, for Sports Reporter Chase Matteson, I'm Bill Rentschler. Thanks, everyone, for jumping in and joining us again today. Again, as always, keep it tuned to 1011, both on air and online, for all of your latest news, weather, and sports.
You've been listening to the REPORT Husker Show from 1011. Watch, listen, and stream on the 1011 Now app, on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more Husker coverage throughout the week, watch the REPORT on 1011 Sports at 6 and 10 p.m. and download the 1011 Now app.